Hello, dear listener, and welcome to Hacker Talk, the podcast by hackers for hackers. The voice you're hearing right now is me, Philip. I will be your host during today's episode. And today, I'm joined by two interesting hackers that have teamed up and wrote the book Black Hat Python, second edition. Justin has spent years doing pen testing and been involved in the IT security field, as well as doing investigations with open source intelligence. Last but far from least, Tim Arnold is a professional Python developer, security researcher. The list goes on and on. It's a pleasure to have both Justin and Tim on Hacker Talk today. How are you guys doing?
Hey, Philip, I'm doing great. Thank you for having us on the show.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks again.
So I'm really interested to hear your stories of how you guys got into information technology and security, and why security, why technology. Let's start with you, Justin. What got you interested in technology and security?
Well, I mean, I think to get interested in technology, it started when I was really young. So I started writing code shortly after I could read, was pretty enthralled with it. And then I think just started out as a developer, did system administrative work, was always interested in kind of hacker culture and, learning how to work around things. Eventually moved on to a startup where I was responsible for QA, which in my mind really meant I got to break everything, which really lent me towards learning how to reverse engineer and do kind of extensive debugging. And from there, just naturally led me down this path where I started exploit writing and bug hunting and doing a lot of work through the direct kind of security field. So yeah, it really started from a young age, and eventually, probably my lack of respect for authority and my desire to break stuff lent very well to getting into the cybersecurity scene.
Awesome. Was there any light bulb moment where you were like, wow, this is really cool, maybe pulling off your first exploit or something like that?
Definitely. Yeah. I think the big one for me was writing, my first remote exploit where I was, able to completely compromise something. There was no patch available. And I kind of sat back and went, this is really cool. And
what exploit was it?
I actually can't tell you.
Okay.
From many moons ago. And then subsequently was, actually had a run-in with LinkedIn at one point, and over one of their browser, they had an ActiveX control back in the day that a colleague and myself had released the 0 day for. But I think it was that kind of dopamine hit every time you were successful in breaking something, or you would work for weeks on reverse engineering something, and you would finally get to that point where your exploit worked, right? And you got that shot of like dopamine, adrenaline, whatever, and you're like, oh, that's
the greatest. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And then that just fed the fuel to, I got to do this more, right? It's like a drug, being able to like, okay, where's the next bug? Where's the next thing?
Oh, I think a lot of people that are I know a lot of people I talked with that are pen testers and working out the security. They basically say the same thing, that there are a lot of people are chasing that magic dragon, so to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is very much like, it is like a code-based heroin, I guess, is probably the dragon you're chasing.
Exactly. Tim, what got you into all this?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm a little bit older than Justin, so I didn't start from a young age, but I was in university and doing a statistics degree, and they just assumed that you knew about computers. They didn't give you any computer classes. And so I just started learning about it on my own. And I do have this in common with Justin, is I've got a problem with authority and I like to break things. So, I was just kind of excited about having the power to make this machine do something. And so I really just kind of fell in love with computers. And so along with statistics and then doing numerical analysis and things like that, that gave me a shot of dopamine, but not like the one when I first saw my first con. I'm in North Carolina, and there was a local conference, And it was like, oh my God, I found my people. It's like, I didn't know these people existed. It's like, we're all trying to help each other learn.
There's other people like me.
Cool stuff. And it was like, oh my God, I just can't believe all these people have been here and I've been just kind of alone doing the same thing. So that was kind of how I got into it. And the more I saw after that first con, the more I tried to be more as a hobbyist, a programmer for pay, but a hacker hobbyist on the side for fun. And that's how I kept going further into the hacker community. And besides, everybody is so, not like the opposite of gatekeeping. It's like they're very welcoming and want to share with you what they know. And there's not a lot of communities like that. So I just was overwhelmed with the amount of kindness that's in this community.
I think you touched on a great spot there. The Infosec community is really, really open and welcome and sharing ideas. And there's always conferences going on. There's always so much going on in the Infosec space, which I think is amazing. Because when I started with doing writing exploits and stuff like that, everything was just private forums. So there wasn't really welcoming all the time. It was more like, here, you have to, if you want to join this forum, then you have to prove that you're... prove that you're it. What was the name of the conference that you went to?
Well, it's changed its name now to CackalackyCon, but
CackalackyCon.
CackalackyCon.
Okay.
It used to be CarolinaCon, but there was an argument over the name. But the local one here is now CackalackyCon, and it's just a group of really good people. And we also there's an organization here called the Information Systems Security Association, ISSA, and they have local chapters as well as being an international organization. And the local chapter here is very active, and they were very welcoming and helped me get started. And when I need to learn something, I find the best way to do that is to teach it. And so they let me start teaching some basic courses to the local ISSA.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, don't you find that yourself, that the best way to learn something is to teach it or to write about it?
Yeah. I think for me personally, I think teaching it and also actively doing it, like trying smallly changing things until it starts to work.
Exactly. I think that's the tinkering method to get to success.
Exactly. That's the hacker mentality.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the way to do it.
So how did you guys join Paths?
Okay.
And how did you meet, first off?
Well, Philip, today is the first time Justin and I have talked to each other. We've communicated by email.
Really? This is the first time?
In fact, today, this is the first time I'd seen his picture, except for his handle, his avatar on Twitter.
on Hacker Talk podcast is where it happens.
That's right. There you go. Well, for me, so I was telling you about how I would giving courses for the ISSA, the local one. And so we wanted to try doing a webinar. And so my language is Python. And I thought, okay, let's do a webinar or remote classes and use Black Hat Python, Justin's original Black Hat Python, as the text. And we'll go through that book. And, we're going to learn how to hack and we're going to learn a lot of Python. And so my experience with the book started out that way. I'd already read it, but there's a whole lot of difference between reading a book and actually putting it into a teaching scenario. And so that was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot doing that. And it kind of, I don't know, I had a personal connection to the book by that point. And then on Twitter, Bill Pollack, the owner of No Starch Press, asked the public, what would you like to see as readers? And I said, well, we need a second edition of Black Hat Python because, this was Python 2. Justin had written it in Python 2, and by now Python 3 was getting to be popular, and I think most people were moving to Python 3. And so I was in a conversation back and forth with Newstarch about that, and I said, I'd be glad to give it a try. And they said, well, let's do it. And so we actually started the second edition by a chat on Twitter. And then, of course, that's when Justin came in to provide his advice and consulting on how we would do the second edition.
All true. I'm here to confirm it.
So what did you think, Justin, when they approached you about the second edition of the book?
Yeah, I right away was fully supportive, made myself available, said, whoever's doing this, this is great. I want them to have full control over how they rewrite it. I don't want to stand in their way. I don't want to crush anyone's creativity. I want to make sure they can add whatever they want to it and, leverage whatever I've already put in it. And I largely, wanted to be hands off and let Tim bring his experience and bring his knowledge, and, to be able to use what I had already done as a framework. And that was really it.
Was there any special tools and techniques that you guys thought was like, this is something we really need to put in the second edition?
I'm thinking about that because the way I was thinking about it is that Justin has all these really good techniques that are already there. I think some of them had to be adjusted because, it's always an arms race between one side and the other.
Yeah.
And things had changed. Justin, I believe that you were doing this against, on your Windows exploits, you were doing it against Windows XP 32-bit.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I don't think I used any 64-bit stuff in either of my books, actually.
Okay. Yeah. And I remember one chapter we were working on an in-memory exploit, and where the code never actually hits the disk. And I saw how good Windows 10 was because if I ever tried to write it to disk, poof, it would disappear before I could execute it. Like, wow, I didn't know Windows 10 was that. So there were some changes we had to make through not to every chapter, but just to some, to bring it up to date, not only for Python 3, but for Windows 10 and 64-bit machines. Yeah, that was quite a learning experience for me because I'd started out repeating, when I was teaching, it was repeating what Justin did with Python 2. But with some of these, it just required updating the technology, and Microsoft, for the Windows exploits, Microsoft had already provided some of their documentation, like to make some of these things work against a 64-bit machine, just required a little bit more flag setting, on some of the library that we used. But as far as the actual content, every chapter I tried to keep everything in the same vein that it was originally, just updated and, but brought my own taste to programming style. But what Justin said is right. He gave me, he didn't try to get in the way at all. It surprised me. I thought, this is Justin's baby. He might be kind of, resistant having somebody take his creative work and just changing it. But he wasn't. And I've never met anybody that lifts other people up like Justin does. Every time, a question would come up, he would give in a way of speaking, give the microphone to me. And it's just been an awesome person to meet and to work with.
Oh, well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate that.
It's true, Justin.
Let's try to be nice.
Yeah.
So I assume you guys both are really into Python. Do you guys have any favorite libraries, Python libraries, that you think are very underappreciated and more people should use?
I don't know about more people should use, but I feel like Lxml is just a fantastic library. I use it for everything to do with not only XML, but actually web scraping. But it is, the code base is very good. It's just good to read it. But also to be able to use it, it makes web scraping easy. And if you're actually creating HTML for the web, then it just creates it in a way that I don't need to worry about it. It's going to be okay. It's going to be standardized. No browser is going to barf on it. So, and so that's one of my very favorite libraries. And actually, we use that in the web scraping chapter in web scraping in chapter 5.
Yeah, for me, it is hands down requests. So that there are very few times that I don't end up pulling out that library for one reason or another. Just universally useful for writing tests, for pulling APIs, anything. Like, it's so nice. You can
you can make
basic stuff
to request in one line.
Exactly, right? You can pull JSON down all the way to, if you need to, you can easily expose the inner workings of it if you have to do something customized. I mean, there's so many great Python libraries out there, but requests is like hands down the one I use the most.
I've used it so many times I'd forgotten about how much I love that one. And that you can keep a session open, and so you don't have to keep authenticating yourself. You can just keep that open and that, I don't know, it's just, like you say, it is just very, very convenient to you.
Totally.
It is very, very convenient HTTP.
What about you, Philip? Is there a favorite one for you?
I don't know, really. I kind of like, it's a bit off topic, but I've been writing APIs for something called Pledge, which is a system call in OpenBSD, the operating system. And I've been looking into, there's this Python Pledge library. And short, Pledge is this basic process monitor. So each process makes a pledge telling that, hey, I'm only allowed to access this or do this. And if I breaks it, if I do a write operation, when I'm only allowed to do read operation, the program just dies. So I've been playing around a lot with doing system calls in Python, which I think is fun.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Very cool.
And Justin's, well, not Justin's, but the chapter on Scapy, that's an incredible package, and that whole chapter really goes through how easy it is to create whatever package you want to, and you've got total control. It just makes everything very convenient for packet analysis. And I think there's even some graphic packages you can add, so you can see, like, on a world map where your packets are going or coming.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I think you have to load something special. I can't think of it right now, but it's a mapping module that goes along with it. But yeah, so it's kind of cool to be able to see where your packets are going in the world. And I think there's some that will just take apart a packet and display it to you graphically, so you can see what parts.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, I think it's a really good package.
I think that is often covered in pen testing guides I've seen online and tutorials. Scapy, it's very, very popular, it seems like.
Yeah, anything to do with packet analysis with Python, I think Scapy, I don't know how do you say it right, but that's what I call it. It's just incredible. I think it was written by one person, and it's just a piece of art.
Absolutely. Have you guys, do you guys fiddle with any other programming languages? Justin, you mentioned that you started programming at a very young age. How was your programming journey?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I started out with GW Basic. So when you bought a Microsoft machine back in the day, you got these like stack of white books, and you could start, putting together these very simple programs. I also And I don't know, I think basic is also what the trash 80s and stuff we're using too, or a flavor of it, right? Where you had to write your own games. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it started there, and then, I came from a really rural small town. My computer science class, I think we were doing turtle stuff on Apple IIe's or something like that. Then I was a web developer, so cut my teeth in PHP. And then I used PHP for all kinds of stuff that you probably shouldn't. And I had a very good buddy, still a good friend of mine, Dave, who popped by my desk the one day and was just like, dude, I don't know why you do all of this in PHP. Have you ever used Python? Like, no. And he's like, seriously, it'll take you 5 minutes to learn. And that was it. Like, that was the end of it. So I spent most of my time writing Python, but I can write JavaScript and a handful of other languages. I'm terrible at C and C++, awful. I loved VB6, loved it. Still yearn for the days of VB6 and an Access database. But unfortunately, nothing ever was quite as friendly. I never really got into C# or a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, that was really it. And then, for the most part now, there's really, I think the only language I would want to maybe start learning more of is Go, just because it is much like Python, easy to read and understand how to write for the most part, but the performance is just off the charts compared to Python for like distributed systems and that kind of thing.
I feel like the entire Infosec scene and the Infosec space is moving to Golang. Do you guys see this as well? Because I see like more and more tools are being ported to Golang, and Golang, it's kind of, I don't know. Do you guys think that Golang can become the next Python?
I think Go is really becoming more and more important in the data analysis world as well because of its performance. But yeah, I do. I think it is increasing in its popularity, and I think, like Justin said, it is so much more powerful for a lot of things that would make it faster than Python. And yet it's easy to read and understand. And so I play with Go a little bit. I'm not a good Go programmer, but I do play with it some. But Python's my main one. But I think you're right. Go is going to get more popular. I don't know about Ruby. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, I don't know that Go will ever replace Python, as the de facto kind of language a lot of people are turning to, but I can definitely see that it's just in a lot of ways, more and more tools are going to start out from the ground up using Go, instead of starting out Python or, and again, for Ruby, a lot of that I think just came from the fact that Metasploit was written in it, right? And HD did it all in Ruby. I never learned Ruby. I struggled with it, truthfully, at a lot of time. I don't know why, just a difficult time kind of coding in it. And I always had this like perfect dream of porting Metasploit to Python and calling it a day.
I've thought that before myself.
Yeah. And I was at Immunity and we had Canvas, which was all written in Python. And of course, Core Impact was all Python as well. So it was one of those things where I was really hopeful that someday someone would port all of Metasploit over, but they didn't. But yeah, I think Go is going to continue to be increasingly more popular. I think that Python is still going to be kind of that gateway drug for a lot of people because it's so easy to just pick it up and start doing cool stuff and not worrying about really setting up an environment or a build chain or anything like that. It's just like off you go, and you can just do your thing. And even like recently, there's this great tool called Onion Scan built in Go by Sarah Jamie Lewis, and they had built this great tool in Go, but had moved on to other things, and people were having a tough time just getting the binary to compile. And there's a Docker image that includes it, but it doesn't talk to Tor v3 onions and all this stuff. So I spent like a couple of days like figuring out how to patch the code and get it all working again. And largely I was like, if this was in in Python, this would be much, much simpler, right? Like this, a lot of people wouldn't be running into this kind of issue. And I think that that's where there's that barrier to entry, right? Where someone wants to run something, if it's Python, largely it's pip install the requirements, off you go for the most part. Some of this other stuff that's compiled, there's these barriers to entry sometimes that prevent people from that initial frustration, and that friction can be the difference between someone learning a language and not. And I always find that Python is a pretty reliable way to go from zero to hero.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sometimes I'll see a new project and you have to install a Docker image, and that's just something that I might not want to do. If it was just plain Python code, I would just get it and I would start playing around with it. Because like you say, there's not this whole environment you have to set up.
Yeah, and you can have virtual environments in Python as well. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that I need that so much. I mean, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have virtual environments anymore. So, okay, you two guys, do you use pipenv or any kind of other tool other than pip to do your environment management, like Poetry or?
No, it's just straight up create a virtual env, drop into it, activate it, pip install whatever I need, off I go. I don't know what Poetry is, so I might have to Google this afterwards.
Oh, Poetry is do you know, have you heard of pipenv? PIPENV?
No.
Oh, okay, well then never mind, because I'm just making your life worse. Because I think what you're doing is the simplest and the best way to go. Make a virtual environment and just use pip. So just disregard Poetry and pipenv. Because now there's there's this kind of a battle for people who do like virtual environment managers, and pipenv and Poetry are kind of tools to help you do that. And also there's tools to help you have multiple Python installations and to be able to flip between those easily. But for me, I really just use the latest Python, virtual env, and pip.
How do you guys develop? What IDE do you use? Do you have any special workflow for writing code? What works for you guys?
I'll be interested to hear what Justin says. I used to use just Emacs and a terminal, but once I started using VS Code, it just makes things so much easier for me. I like the syntax highlighting. It can help me correct mistakes before I even know, it's like you misspelled that variable or whatever. And it's like that's very helpful. So I use that as my go-to. And another thing is I work in a lot of different languages. And so I can use that same tool, VS Code, whether it's JavaScript. LaTeX is a typesetting language. I use that a lot, and Python, and also SAS, which is the company I used to work for, that makes business intelligence software. So I use VS Code for nearly everything, except if I'm just doing something to play around. And then I may just use the Python shell, or I might use VI, whatever, just to play around with. But if it's something that's going to have classes or need, several functions to call, so I'll use VS.
I'm also moving more and more into VS Code. I've been kind of against VS Code for a while because, everyone was like, no, it's built by Microsoft and all that.
Now Microsoft has GitHub, man.
I know. They're becoming good. They're becoming the next.
They're actually becoming good. I know. It's like we used to love to hate them, and now it's like, hey, it's not so bad.
I'm a giant Vim user myself, and I'm getting more and more into using VS Code just because of the plugins and also GitHub Copilot. If you should check that out.
Things about that.
That is really, really cool. It's basically, for you guys, listeners don't know, GitHub Copilot is a new plugin and beta version of an AI system that GitHub has been working on with data sets from Stack Overflow. You basically write a comment and a code comment, and then it writes a function for you.
But Philip, I saw where it was duplicating some bad code from GitHub. Because it's AI, it's trained on that code base. So if somebody's writing crappy code, you might get your own version of crappy.
Oh, you think there's a lot of bad practices that you put into it?
I haven't used it, so you're more of an expert on it than I am. I just read an article that said that. So
That's an
I
interesting
can't
take.
say that it's that way, but that's what I read. It seems like
definitely-
it's possible that AI could give you some bad code.
Yeah, I was going to say, you definitely wouldn't want an AI model training on my coding. That's for sure. That would be a bad day for everyone else. I use Wingide. I've been using it for, holy man, I'm getting old. I've been using it for
time. You used it in the original Black Hat Python.
Yeah, I've been 15 years.
Wow.
Almost. Yeah, 15 years I've been using Wing. All of my students I taught Wing, and I mean, I use it. It's familiar. Its debugging capabilities are amazing, and particular, like, I used to do a lot of work and exploit and bug hunting stuff using Immunity Debugger, and one of the great things with Wing was this ability to just, I could include in my Immunity Debugger scripts debug stub and run my IDE, run the actual Immunity Debugger, and then have it actually trip, and I could walk through my Python code live in my IDE and have my debugger running at the same time. It was a huge thing. And even for, if you're building like some test service in Flask or something deployed remotely, that you're able to do that over SSH or all kinds of stuff. But yeah, for me, it's just one of those products that has, year after year, I renew my license, and year after year, I get a very predictable product that just, nothing huge changes. It just works. Their customer support's amazing. And for debugging, I haven't personally found a better tool for it.
Well, Justin, that sounds really cool. Is there a free version of it for people to try, or do you know?
They do have a free version. I think it's called Wing 101, something like that.
Okay.
Now, there might be some limitations on what you can do with the debugging in the free version, and I'm sure there's some other limitations.
Right.
But it's great. And particularly if you got virtual environments too, you just tell it, like, I want you to activate this virtual env when you start, and you can switch between them easily. And yeah, I mean, I use probably 5% of the product. That's it.
I know.
Like, there's diffing tools, there's all kinds of stuff that you can do with it. I really only use about 5% of the product, but that 5% works exactly as I need it to. And it has for 15 years.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's written in Python as well.
It is written in Python as well. Yeah.
I think of the things you mentioned, I don't know much about the debugging part for VS Code, but you can do SSH and.
Yeah, that's very, very nice.
Yeah.
Both have both IDs.
Right.
Yeah, both IDs have. I've been using Wing for my Python stuff, and their support, like you said, they're amazing. I would like to give a shout out to a person at Wing, but I don't remember their name right now. But yeah, they're really good. But yeah, VS Code actually has the same, or almost the same, where you can add the remote host. I do use it over SSH. It's really useful.
Yeah, I like VS Code, but I see tutorials that talk about the debugging capabilities, but I hate to admit this, but I still use print statements a lot. So,
yeah, me too.
I'm not an expert on debuggers.
So, Justin, you touched upon, or you ran over onion scan. Have you dabbled anything with the Tor related stuff?
Yeah, for sure. We actually at Hunchly, we have a daily dark web report that goes out, and all it's doing is it's got a big database of Tor onions. It checks them continuously throughout the day, and it does some very simple kind of pattern extraction and checks a few online sources for any new onions that we're not aware of in the previous day. So it's a distributed system that's all written in Python, actually. So basically you have, it is very much an old method of doing this. You probably could easily migrate this to Cloud Functions or something like that, or Lambda. But really, it's just this distributed system. You have a handful of these crawlers with a XML RPC server sitting in one spot, and they just check in, get a new onion, route out through a Tor proxy, check the onion, return the response back to the server. It shoves it in the database, and then once a day, there's just literally a cron job that runs in Python that assembles all the results up and pushes it to a Dropbox folder.
Cool. What have you found so far? Have you gotten any interesting? How long have you been doing it for?
So that thing has been running for 4 or 5 years. I'd actually have to look. The Dropbox folder actually has all the historical every day for however many years backwards in it. So you can go back and pull from 3 years ago if you wanted to see the status of one of the onions. And it's not, this is not a comprehensive, it's not a comprehensive database. It's really designed so, when things pop up, whether it's child sexual abuse material or it's, a new counterfeit site or whatever it might be, depending on what people are interested in for investigations, that they have this real quick way of like getting this report, popping it open in the morning, seeing what's new, and then being able to go and investigate it. So there's been everything from, abuse sites all the way gambling, counterfeit, data dumps, all kinds of stuff. And we're not indexing the sites and we don't filter them. We don't screenshot them. We don't do anything like that. We just pull the title off of the page and that's it.
Justin, do you know if there's a showdown method to get to the dark web?
I'm not aware of a way to do it on Shodan, but I do know that someone recently had taught me that you could use Archive.is actually to archive onions. And so there's a way to actually get Archive.is to go out and preserve an onion for you. And so that was pretty cool. But there's kind of that's really the thing why I love Onion Scan is because it'll build you an entire correlation lab and everything. You get like a web interface to explore the dark web data that you scan. And there's really like outside of commercial sources, there's not really a great place to do kind of dark web Shodan like kind of work, right? So it's always been a thing, and I think that like the commercial databases are great, but not everybody has $5,000 or $20,000 a month to access it. So there are some there's some other services out there that have there's some search services and stuff too, but really like most technical people could probably deploy the Fresh Onions project themselves and really get a lot of intel that way. So Fresh Onions is, it's commonly known as like a dark web search, place that people can go, usually hosted, or at least there was even just one instance hosted that had tens of thousands of onions and snapshots, and you could keyword search it and all that. But it's actually an open source project. You can go and deploy the system yourself and it'll go out and just start crawling and populating your own kind of database. So I think, combining some of the interesting tools in Onion Scan with something like Fresh Onions would actually get you quite a lot.
Okay. Interesting.
Hasn't there been a lot of rumors that when you register a new .onion domain, that request goes to like a DHT, a distributed hash table, and there's ways to probe these DNS systems for new domains?
I think, unless Tim wants to jump in here, I'm not really aware of any particular weaknesses around that, but I do know that in old Tor, V2, and I don't know if it was just specific to V2, but you could actually run, and this may still exist today, but you could actually run a malicious, basically like hidden service directory node, right? That's used for routing, and kind of see, it would allow you to kind of build an inventory of any Tor requests that we're passing through, so that you could see, like, try to get an idea of where all of the onions are in the network, right, over time. I think there's also the notion that, the Tor network is not that large, right? So with even limited amounts of resources, all you need to do is really spin up, thousands of Tor nodes yourself, and you can probably learn a lot either from the traffic passing through or traffic exiting. So the more of the network that you control, the more you can plot between two hops what's going on, or potentially where people are exiting. But I'm not aware of any specific technical attacks that's outside of my wheelhouse.
Yeah, and mine as well.
So I'm interested in I assume you guys have worked professionally with Python. Do you guys have any production tips of doing production Python code?
I'm trying to think of what that might mean.
Or any special coding patterns that you are?
Yeah, I know what you're. I think I understand what you're saying. Geez, I hate to think that I'm a cowboy programmer. I don't have a lot of. I just start to code and, like you said, tinker until I get something to work. And once I get something to work, I try to make it understandable. So I might just rearrange all my code and kind of restructure it in the hopes that I'll understand it a few months from now. And after that, I guess the last thing to do would be to try to make it fast. But to be honest, with the work I do, it's fast enough as it is. I usually never need to go back and optimize code unless I've done something really stupid, like function calls inside of a loop. But I guess I don't have a production method. So what about you, Justin?
Oh, I mean, anybody who knows me and hears this question is already laughing.
Yeah.
Totally. I am much like you, probably far worse. So a lot of the work I do generally is prototyping work, where I'm solving a problem and then handing it to someone who's a professional developer who uses all of the proper test-driven development. And I couldn't even write a unit test if my life depended on it. I don't fully I'm brutal at Git. At my previous job, I somehow managed to take ownership of literally every file in the repository and add my name to it by accident. You name it. I really am very much a lone developer who builds stuff to solve kind of tricky problems and then explains it to somebody else so that they can then build a production grade bulletproof system. So that's really where I've always functioned well, and never really got to the point where I would call myself a professional Python developer ever.
Well, I bet you were very popular after owning all the files and Git.
No, it was SVN actually. And it was hilarious. I mean, everybody thought it was the funniest thing ever because we were all just perplexed as to how exactly I had managed to do that, even myself included.
Well, I know what you mean. Yeah. So I think we're just kind of lucky in that way that we can just start off tinkering and, just try to get something to work. Like you said, prototype work.
So, since you guys, like you said a bit, since you updated the book, a lot of new references, and especially keeping up to date in the IT security field, or keeping up to date with all these exploit techniques and all these tools. How do you guys do that? How do you guys stay up to date with all the new techniques and tools and everything?
Well, I don't know that I do, but I try. And I think a lot of it is, for me, I've got a collection of blogs that I read. I got people that I follow on Twitter. Sometimes I'll just search through Git and see what's going on, just to get an idea about what people are working on. Or, I'll get some idea and think, I wonder if anybody's doing this. And then just do some searches and try to find out what the state is that I can find on Git. But I don't have a, how can you? We're all human. It's impossible to keep up, in my opinion. It's an arms race every day. Somebody comes up with a way to break something. Somebody comes up with a way to stop that way. And so it just keeps escalating. So I think, we do the best we can, but we can't ever be 100% sure of ourselves.
Yeah, and for me, like, to be honest, it's been some time since I've written an exploit. So I do less and less of that as I spend most of my time working in OSINT and building tools around intelligence systems. So yeah, it's funny because one of my favorite conversations actually was someone called me about a month ago, and they were reverse engineering a Windows driver. And I was like, oh, this is my favorite. This was like my thing, right? Like, and it was funny how, yeah, just like being able to still talk about all that stuff was great. And to hear, a lot of bug hunting and stuff is still going on in those areas. But I think that if you look at the modern exploit developer today versus when I kind of stopped doing a lot of exploit writing, I mean, the level of difficulty, the number of exploits you have to chain together to bypass all the modern operating system protections, the fact that they're really 0 days generally don't just stand on their own anymore as one single exploit. Really, there's a lot more involved. I'm actually kind of grateful that when I was writing exploits, and even just as common protections were coming into play, that they were easy to bypass, and exploit writing was pretty fun. And now I look at it and I'm like, hats off to these people, because it is so much more work and so much harder. And it used to be a lot simpler when I was doing it. It really was. So yeah, I mean, I still enjoy it, and I'm still, involved in the cybersecurity community in various ways. Just in a totally different department.
Yeah, that's the same way I feel. When I read through, a walkthrough of an exploit, it's like, I'm glad there are people that enjoy that level of detail, but my mind just won't take it, because there's just, like you said, you have to change so many things together now. And before, you could just, mark some memory where it's writable and write something on it. So it wasn't as complicated as it is now.
Yeah, that's very true. There is getting harder and harder with all these mitigation techniques being put in place by the operating systems. And I was trying to think the last time I wrote Windows exploits, and I think it was 2 years ago, where there was like this Windows exploit 2 years ago, and it was called Blue something. Very popular.
Yeah, I remember that. I thought it was even older than that, but I can't. We might be talking about two different exploits. So,
are you referring to Eternal Blue? That one?
That's the one. Also.
Eternal Blue. That's not one.
It was an SMB bug, I think. Oh, the glorious SMB bugs over the years too.
There's been a lot.
Although MS-08067, I can still rattle it off, because that thing was like the gift that kept giving on any Windows network in an enterprise back in the day. It was just amazing.
And that's Eternal Blue.
No, Eternal Blue, I think it was a few years ago. MS-08067 was like from 2008. You could just ransack a network with it when it came out. It was great.
That's cool. Wasn't Eternal Blue, wasn't that the SMB bug that was released by NSA?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
I'd forgotten they did that.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, that one exploit could get you through a lot of the machines on offensive security labs.
So, as like book creators, I know it's like writing a book is not easy. And I've never written a book, been editor to one book, and that took a lot of time. And but how is your guys' writing process?
Justin, why don't you get that one started?
Yeah, so my first book was an unmitigated disaster from a writing perspective. So it really taught me that, yeah, it gave me a lot of tools to think about how to do the next book better. And if and when I ever do a third book, God help us all, I would still probably do things differently. My process for the second book was really right away I knew having more than one technical reviewer was important. So much like a QA team should be diverse, it was the same thing where I wanted to have two people who could review my code, run my code, tell me how to improve it, tell me where it breaks, to reduce the amount of errata that came out after the book is done, because you are just exhausted. By the time your book is finished, you're just like, you don't even want to look at it anymore. And that's actually, you're only about halfway through the journey at that point, right? Really. So that was a critical piece for me, was having two tech reviewers, Cliff and Dan, that both, they were amazing. They fact checked me all the way along. And I also got them to write a chapter and got them to write their own material. I was like, why don't you add something to this? Teach me something. I think that would be great. And so they did that. And I think that taking that kind of collaborative approach as an author is important. You kind of have a little team, and making sure everybody has autonomy and has the ability to contribute and feel like they put their stamp on it. The rest of it was really, for the most part, was to be honest, a lot of it was don't use crappy tools. So in my first book, I was on a Linux machine. I wrote it in Open Office. Everything sucked. And so it added all of this friction and overhead, particularly when you don't feel like writing. You want to have the least amount of friction as possible. So literally use Microsoft Word, use tools that are going to make your life easier. Put the whole thing in Git, right? Everything, just have a repo that you and your team can use so that you're pushing stuff at it, code, writing, whatever it is. It was a huge improvement. I believe we use Google Drive actually for mine, but I would have used Git if I was doing it again. And then the rest of it is really, for me, learning that don't write the book chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Naturally, for me, there were things in Black Hat Python that I got really excited about, like the GitHub Trojan. I was like, that is going to be so much fun. And it wasn't something I had. And that was the other part for me, was that, yes, some things were things I'd already done, but a lot of that book was actually, this is cool stuff I want to do. So I'm going to teach myself and teach other people while I do it, right? And so it made it a lot more fun for me, as opposed to the first book was cool. It was much more technical, but was also a lot of like me just kind of replaying stuff I had already done, which made it a bit more of a grind, right? And then what I did in the second book was I left the first chapter to the end, because it's kind of, not as an insult to anyone, but it's relatively brainless. It's like, we're going to set this up, we're going to install this is what we're going to do. And the other thing is, it takes a year to write a book. So if you write that first chapter first, all that happens is when you get to the end of your book, you got to go back and like change all the URLs. You got to go back and like, now there's a new version of Python, and really save that chapter for last when you're totally burnt out on writing, because like a robot, you can write that chapter. It doesn't have to have any personality or anything. You can just like in your sleep write it. And all of your tool chain is at the latest part where it has the best opportunity that your readers aren't going to be engaging with something that's out of date. And so you kind of write the book somewhat in reverse, but I looked at the book and said, what are the things that are most fun? And the things that I'm like, yeah, that's going to be cool, but it doesn't really give me that dopamine hit. And I would alternate chapters so that I would do one that was less fun, then do something more fun, then less fun, then more fun. And my final heavy chapter that I wrote, I left the absolute funnest thing for last, and that was that GitHub Trojan. So even though it's in the middle of the book, I left that for the very end, because I knew I'd already done a book. I knew I was going to be burned out. And what it helped to do was kind of reinvigorate me and get me excited and doing some of that stuff. And then I knew after I'm done this one, all I got to do is write this introductory chapter and I'm out, right? So that workflow for me worked really, really well, because writing a book, it's like weightlifting or running a marathon. It's actually got very little to do with your body. It's everything to do in your brain. And, the whole thing is like, for me, recognizing that I needed to just like reduce that friction and really think about how I'm going to feel as I work through writing a book for 10 or 12 months. So those are the big things. And then literally write every day, even if it's just a little bit, right? Like just even, and when you're burnt out or your personal life isn't going well, sometimes that literally meant just opening up the Word document, and you could at least say, I tried today. But at least opening the thing every day really helps, because the longer you leave that document closed and the further you move away from it, the bigger the mountain to climb when it's time to get back to writing. It feels like, oh man, I'm like behind, or I feel like this is going to be a lot of work. Whereas if you have a bit of muscle memory around writing every day, or even just getting that document open, it never feels like you're too far away from the project, and that makes a huge difference. So those are my writing tips for anybody who wants to engage in this crazy in this crazy path, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and that is some excellent advice. I kind of wish I had known that before I started on the second edition. I did follow that advice, and that I started out with chapter 5, which was web scraping, which is something I'm really familiar with. And I wanted to, something not too challenging, just to get my feet wet. And like you said, leave that first chapter alone. Oh, and Philip, the first chapter is about setting up your environment. So installing a virtual machine, getting Kali, and all, just getting all the tools ready. And Justin, I did follow your advice for using Git. I use Git and GitHub a lot for each bit, but we might differ about good tools, because I hate Word. If I had the opportunity to just use LaTeX, I would have been much happier. With a language like Python, where the spaces, definitely important. And I swear, when we went from one edit to another, the spacing would change. I was ready to tear my hair out. So Word was not something I would want to use ever again. But other than that, I thought what you said was great. And I now that you say about the GitHub Trojan, you're right. That was a fun chapter. And you had these other chapters that you could also, incorporate into the GitHub Trojan. And I wish I knew what were the ones that didn't spark joy for you and the ones that did. For me, the toughest one was the last one. The Lexity really, it was so far away from anything I'd ever done before. It was really a challenge. But in fact, looking at some of the Windows chapters you had, I'm really a Unix Linux guy, and so that was all new to me. But I was happy to learn about it. But at first it was a little intimidating, because something I'd never done before. And here I have, I said I was going to do the second edition. I guess I better figure it out. So with every chapter, I'd have 20 tabs open in my browser, all teaching me something about this different topic that you wrote. And then, what a relief when that chapter was done. I could close all those tabs and get started on the next chapter.
That's awesome. And how did Charlie Miller get involved in the foreword? Because I opened up the book, and I didn't know Charlie Miller was giving the foreword, and I was like, wow, he's giving the foreword. Charlie Miller, being for you guys that don't know, he's mostly known for going to for 0 days in Safari browser, right? Based on fuzzing, and he's very into fuzzing. He's a very well-known guy. But yeah, how did he get involved in it?
Yeah, Charlie's a friend of mine. So Dave Attell, who did the foreword in my first book, he was my boss at work. And Dave is an incredible hacker. Still to this day, I guarantee you Dave has more knowledge about writing exploits and low-level operating system internals and a bunch of stuff in his pinky finger than I'll ever possess. And so in the second, for Black Hat Python, I just reached out to Charlie, because the ongoing joke I have with Charlie, and hopefully he listens to this, is I like to tell him how much of a rock star he is, and how honored I am to be in his presence. And that he would ever bestow me with a text message, and he thinks it's hilarious. Charlie's an incredibly skilled reverse engineer and exploit writer as well. He did a lot of the early iOS stuff. He did like him and Chris Valasek led the charge on vehicle hacking. Chris being a bud too, and it just, he's just one of those people that I was like, I would love for you to write a forward. That would be great, and I think it'd be hilarious. And but he is highly skilled.
That's awesome. So what does the future hold for you guys? What are you currently working on?
Well, I've been doing some research on detecting misinformation using Python, like trying to discover Twitter bot networks or misinformation done by influencers on Twitter, and a little bit of machine learning in the same vein to detect misinformation. But I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. But right now, I'm just learning about it, trying to figure out what I might be able to add. And Justin, I think you're very active in the OSINT world.
Yeah, a lot of my time is really spent trying to, see into the future by talking to people where their problems are today, doing intel collection, where their issues are, using our product in particular too. And a lot of my time is spent kind of thinking about how to help people design, systems that are human-led, meaning you have a human being going out and doing OSINT collection. How do we tie together that and all of this, massive sea of data that exists out there, instead of vacuuming up the whole internet, which I think has been the approach for a long time. Let's just suck up every piece of information and, give somebody a network diagram to look at it and call it a day. And my approach is much more human beings are the best analysts and investigators. You'll never train a model on it. And so thinking about how to build systems and how to build tech behind the human instead of the other way around.
That's awesome. So guys, thank you guys for being on the show. Is there anything you guys would like to cover more or jump deeper into, or is there anything I forgot to cover that you guys want to bring up?
Philip, I felt like you covered everything very well. I didn't have anything to add, and I appreciate your questions and the opportunity to be here.
No, I'm all good. Thank you so much. These are a great time. Great to finally meet Tim too. Brought together finally at last. So no, it's been great. I really appreciate you having me on, and appreciate Tim being here, and thanks again. It's been great.
Awesome. So guys, how do our listeners stalk you on the internet? How do they stay up with what you guys are doing?
Well, this has been a strange year for me, and after January, I just kind of destroyed all my social media. I don't have a LinkedIn. I don't have a Twitter anymore. I've got an email address, and that's tim@reachtim.com. So if people need me, they can contact me directly at tim@reachtim.com. But I'm not on these social media anymore.
That's pretty funny, Tim, because I was going to DM you the other day. I'm like, where the hell is Tim? Why can't? And then I searched for you. I'm like, I can't be that good at OSINT if I can't find Tim. So then I had to email you, and I didn't even think that maybe you'd blown away all your stuff. For me, I'm JMS_DOT_Pi on Twitter, or you can just Google Justin Seitz Python and you'll find me.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for coming on Hacker Talk. And for all listeners, you gotta check out Justin and Tim's book. It is available on No Storage. Justin, Tim, thank you so much once again for coming on Hacker Talk. Have a good one. I'll see you guys in the future.
Thanks so much.